Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everybody, welcome to my guide for Bellona. Bellona is a soul lane warrior and is centered around basic attack damage, and by extension attack speed. Her abilities don't do low damage, but this focus on more attack speed and basic attack items means that Bellona is a consistently strong pick in the soul lane and is able to tangle with soul laners during the laning phase, but still square off with carries and mages come late game. A big deciding factor for Bellona's effectiveness is how strong her favorite items are, and right now things are looking good for her. Bellona needs a bit of attack speed and some damage. She's not like other warriors where you can just take a splash of damage then build whatever counter items you may need. But again, like I've mentioned before, melee basic attack based characters benefit from movement speed and attack speed alike, so you still get amazing options like Witchblade, Toxic Blade, Kin's, Executioner, etc. So use my builds as a baseline, but don't forget to check out any movement speed or attack speed items as well in order to fit the current situation better. Relics wise, Bellona needs teleport to start off. She's not great in the early game, and as a basic attack based god, needs to be farmed up to dive in the enemy's backline once teamfights start happening, or she'll die long before she can deal the damage she needs to. Second relic, like most soul laners, is really up to you. Progressive relics like Horrific, Sprint, and Thorns are all great on her. But against more CC heavy comps, you absolutely do need beads second. So let's dive into Bellona with easily one of the best passes in the entire game. Every time Bellona successfully basic attacks or is hit by a basic attack, she gains a stack on her passive. She gains 5 protections and 3% movement speed, stacking up to 5 times and lasts a whopping 7 seconds. This ability is fantastic for the entire game, but especially in the early game. The protections are definitely nice and all, but it's really the movement speed that takes Bellona to another level. If Bellona gets full passive, there's literally no one who can keep up with her or outrun her in the early game. So, but needless to say, keep it at max stacks all the time. Bellona doesn't really have a wave clear ability per se, so keeping this passive stacked consistently is quite simple. It just depends on what hit chain you're using. Oh, right, after Bellona casts one of her 3 main abilities, she gains access to a new hit chain. Here, let's just get to it with her first ability. Bellona dashes forward a very small amount, but strikes forward in a wide but short AoE cone in front of her, damaging and slowing all enemies hit. This dash will stop short if there are any enemies on the edge of the cone AoE, so being in front of Bellona just a smidge can completely neuter her dash range. She starts out in this stance with 1 block stack, then may gain another block stack by successfully basic attacking gods 3 times. These block stacks are unique though. They will deal 30% of the blocked basic attack's damage in an AoE around Bellona. If you can't tell already given the pitiful damage, this ability isn't really about the damaging area. It's about the small gap close, the slow, and of course the new basic attack chain. This basic attack chain is Bellona's best for boxing by a mile. It's a half power hit followed by 2 full power hits, and all of them come out blazingly fast, meaning that your passive and any on-hit items become much more effective while utilizing this mode. And of course, thanks to the fast attack speed, your block stacks get built up faster than they ever would with your original basic attack chain. It's a stellar ability, and for all these abilities which change your basic attack chain, you'll remain in that basic attack chain for 8 seconds after landing a basic attack. Meaning that if you just keep basic attacking, you'll be in that chain potentially forever. Keep in mind that this timer is only 1 second off of your passive timer, so just use your passive timer as a timer for your hit chain to return to normal too. All that said, it's great for both starting or ending combos, although I prefer ending combos with it since your block stacks from this ability will disappear as soon as you use any other ability other than your ultimate. To give you a better idea of what I'm trying to get at, let's check out Bellona's second ability. Bellona swings her hammer around in AoE, then slams it in front of her in a narrow rectangle AoE. This final slam's damage can be increased by a flat 25% for every god struck by that initial swing, meaning it can deal up to 125% of its base damage. Already though, I'm sure you spotted an issue, or should I say the issue with this ability. It is completely interruptible by any form of hard CC for the duration of that windup. And if you couldn't already tell, this is Bellona's big, hard-hitting ability, so having it be interrupted by, well, let's take a quick look at the count here. About 100 different gods is not great for her. Well, in theory at least, but it matters little to Bellona whether or not she gets this ability off while trying to clear the wave, since she still maintains the new basic attack chain regardless of whether or not the ability went through. This new hit chain hits completely in an AoE in front of Bellona and strikes in a 1.5 times damage multiplier than a regular full damage basic attack, and I'm sure you can already tell it's significantly slower than her base speed, or especially her first ability stance. Even if Bellona's lacking in a dedicated wave clear, she at least has this wave suppressant to knock down the wave, not to mention sustain up massively with her now AoE basic attacks, which the starter item Death's Toll does indeed proc off for every hit. It's excellent and a stance you want to keep yourself in, although I do see some Bellona players overusing this basic attack chain. While it does have the heaviest individual hits of her basic attack chains, after about 3 or so basic attacks, her first abilities chain easily takes the cake as her best basic attack chain for both boxing and taking down things such as towers. You do, however, want to stick in the stance so long as there's any enemy minions remaining, as this is essentially insurance that you can hit both any enemy gods that get in your face as well as their pesky minions. But taking it back for a second, what do you do about folks stopping your initial swing and AoE slam? It used to be a point of contention for Bellona, but now it's more just like a fact of life. Regardless of the matchup, you pretty much always want to go for this ability no matter what, as the bare minimum still leaves you with that great basic attack chain for wave clear, and the full execution of this ability leaves you with absolutely stellar clear as well as damage. TLDR, go for every chance you can get, even when you know it'll probably get interrupted. There's a similar idea with Bellona's third ability. Bellona strikes in a very long AoE in front of her, this ability being able to be used over walls. She deals damage in this area and disarms enemies hit by the ability. Just as important as that portion of the ability is the new basic attack chain. This is identical damage-wise to her first ability chain, although this chain comes out a bit slower since it actually has slightly more range than a normal basic attack. This helps Bellona with this ability's final trick. Every third successful basic attack on any enemy, not just gods this time, Bellona is healed for a flat amount. This heal is pretty weak, but it is something you should go for if you can. Bellona is constantly swapping between stances, but if your lane opponents are showing you just too much respect, or if you're just playing ahead, never forget just to slap your 3 on the wave and hold down the basic attack button for some free sustain, not to mention safe damage. So although Bellona struggles to get her second ability off, well, ever really, against most lane opponents, she can still fall back on this ability to deal respectable damage to the wave. In essence, this allows Bellona to use her third ability on the wave as soon as possible, then kite around the minion wave with this basic attack chain for sustain. Then, once your lane opponent tries to shut you down, use your second ability, partly to try to get its excellent damage off, but mostly so that you can switch over to the AoE basic attack chain and really start clearing the wave. The disarm in this ability too I'm sure stuck out to you. Disarms aren't often seen in SMITE, and ranged disarms even less so. It's an insanely good peel ability for anyone including yourself who's getting shredded down by basic attacks. This is case by case of course, but you can completely shut out tons of basic attack stims since the maximum disarm duration of 2.2 seconds covers a majority of the stim durations in SMITE. Okay, so that was a lot to take in, but before we get to Bellona's ultimate, I just wanted to go over how these basic attack chains and 3 normal abilities work with one another. Call it a mini combo section. While landing on any god, it's important to know what your enemy is and isn't capable of. But with Bellona, this is much more impactful, since you need to end your combos and trades with the correct ability, as in the correct basic attack chain. Generally, ability-based warriors have the best chance of stopping your second ability, so against them, you typically want to start with your 3 to do damage to the wave, sustain all you can, then go for your 2, hang out into 2's basic attack chain until the wave is clear, then use your 1 to either dash onto your lane opponent and get a few basic attacks in, or use your 1 to simply get away from them if they're dealing too much damage. So in turn, with basic attack based characters in the solo lane, you typically want to start with your second ability on the wave and save your first and third for later. Focus on clearing the wave and let them come to you, and the moment they try to stop you from clearing the wave and get in your face, it's your chance to disarm them and give them a good few whacks. Typically you want to get 1 heal off of your 3 and then dash in or out with your first ability depending on your health bar. But let's put a bow on this and talk about Bellona's ultimate. Bellona leaps forward and damages as well as stuns all enemies in the small AoE center of her landing position. A much larger AoE spawns upon landing, this AoE granting Bellona and all allies a very substantial protections and power boost. Needless to say though, this AoE boost is a sideshow compared to the initial leap with its damage and stun though. First and foremost, to get it out of the way, this is Bellona's only get out of jail free card, so when you're getting ganked, it's best just to use it as soon as possible if you know it's a losing fight, and 1 right after as well for maximum distance cover, and not risk getting your dash block. That said though, in plenty of situations from ahead, Bellona can consistently use this aggressively. For now, let's touch on the more nuanced usage in teamfights. Not only is it excellent heal for your team if you get engaged on, it's also stellar as a secondary engage, as in after someone on your team has already engaged. My number 1 tip in teamfights with this ability is to always use it early, but at the same time, you never want to start a fight with it unless you're able to catch someone very much out of position. As I'm sure you can tell, you can pretty much only hit 1 person with it and it's very reactable from the enemy's perspective. The person you land on is sure to use their beat to get out of the stun, and the rest of their team can easily collapse on you with no way for you to get out again. When your ultimate does land successfully though, it's full duke it out time. Speaking of which, let's get to some combos with Bellona. 3 the wave, then try to 2 the wave, then clear the wave with your AoE basic attacks, then try to look for a trade with your first ability, or just use it to get away if it's a losing fight. 2 the wave, then AoE basic attack the wave down. Focus on clearing the wave, but once confronted by your lane opponent, use your 3 and try to get the heal off while they're disarmed. Then, if the trade is in your favor, dash in and start slapping. If not, dash out. If and when you're ahead, to the wave, AoE basic it down, then dash in with your 1, fighting for as long as possible, and then save your 3 and or ultimate for a ranged finisher. And for the record, you can almost always save your ultimate in all of these combos as a finisher or just as a get out of jail free card if you misread the situation. In teamfights, your regular abilities are almost useless, so you'll almost always be starting with your ultimate, but from there, you continue with the same combos as before. Really, which combo you use will depend on who you snagged with your ultimate. If they are an ADC, start with your 3 to disarm them and then box with your 1, saving your 2 as a finishing move. Then, if they're pretty much any other class, you want to start with your 1 and slap them down as much as you can, saving your 2 and or 3 as a finishing move. Speaking of those abilities comes leveling. You want your 2 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 1 at level 3. From there, maxing your 3 and your 2 is a safe choice, although if your lane opponent has absolutely no way to stop your 2 from going off, max that instead. Of course, you do want to get your ultimate at level 5, but then you skip leveling that in favor of getting your 2 and your 3 maxed. Bellona is an absolute legend in SMITE at this point. In terms of competitive relevance, she fell off a long time ago and hasn't come back much since. But when it comes to solo carrying matches as a warrior, few are as consistently effective as Bellona when it comes to pure steamroll factor. Really, when Bellona gets ahead, what can you really do? You can't outrun her, you can't outbox her, and when you use your CC on her to try and get away from you, she just catches back up immediately with her ultimate to bulldoze you. That's all well and good when you get fed though, but of course that won't happen every match. If Bellona isn't able to get her attack speed items online in time, as well as a bit of defense, she's in a bit of a pickle. While her movement speed with her passive is fearsome, she is very stubby outside of her ultimate, so getting in isn't always easy without expending the only tool in your arsenal with a movement disabling CC as well as properly good distance coverage. So of course that's how it goes with most basic attack based gods like her. Get behind and you're almost never able to perform properly. But stay ahead or get even, and there's no chance of escape if Bellona ever catches you. Make sure to sharpen your laning as best as you can with Bellona to make the most use out of her toolset possible, as even though some matchups are painful, Bellona does typically have ways around a lot of the more CC heavy laners, and not to mention her early rotations are absolutely insane if you can time them well enough. All the more reason to be grabbing teleport for yourself. That's about all I have on Bellona for now. Thanks for watching.